we do have some differences on the stabilities between the CS series or previous platforms and the CN series, where we've been able to improve that stability. I'll let you do that because I know you've been involved with the application guide quite intimately, Krish. So
Absolutely.
off you go, mate.
Yeah,
Give the good
no,
news.
Sure. So for honestly, with every reagent for each assay, there is an improvement seen. So just to give you a couple of examples, on the CS series, the PT reagent the majority of our customers use is PT Innovin by Siemens. And on the CS series, the onboard stability, it sits at 96 hours. On the CN series, this has now been increased to 100 hours. And again, it's just that added stability that does provide much usefulness for customers that don't get through a vial, you could say, or the fact that they can load multiple vials and not have to worry about onboard stability. Likewise for Actin FS, again from 96 to 100 hours. For D-dimer, without the use of evaporation caps on the CS series, the onboard stability is 52 hours. This has now been increased to 56 hours. And of course for QCs, all of the QCs involved with routine QC testing can be absolutely in the application sheets stated as 24 hours to provide you with that added safety to ensure that you don't need to be replacing them as often.
Yeah, so just to be clear that all of the PT, APT, fibrinogen are all on board stability is 24 hours for that for those controls now.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of throughput, yes, workflow studies were done by 2 hospitals in Montpellier and also in Paris using Hyphen reagents, so using liquid routine reagents by Hyphen. And it showed exquisite throughput based from the CN's ability to perform clot-based tests within 4.5 minutes. They also did a combination of tests, so it's not just the case for, say, just PTs or APTs, but combining fibrinogen as well. And again, data can be shared based on who's asking the question. In reference to the second question, in terms of why has the sample rack been reduced, compact design. One thing Sysmex Corporation have realized is that laboratory workspace is very much a concern for many sites. So how do you deliver an analyzer with the capacity, with the throughput that's required, but in a smaller space? And to do that, it's also understandable that in hemostasis testing, numbers aren't always large all of the time. They come in a steady flow. So there's this ability to provide a 6 sample rack as opposed to a 10. However, in your laboratory, if it is the case that is not true, you do have a large workload capacity coming all of the time, then obviously that's when intelligent laboratory automation comes in, or in some cases where total laboratory automation, and that uses or connects the CN analyzer via a track system. Good question. So put it this way, with the XN series, we know that we've been able to provide island laboratory automation for quite some time now, a fair number of years. What Sysmex have now been able to achieve is island laboratory automation for coagulation. So putting the two together is, of course, something that we are working towards, but we are not yet able to say when that would be. What we do need to provide with that, though, is not just Sysmex instrumentation, such as XNs, CNs, but also the additional modules required to be able to do that. So tube sorting and archiving, as shown in the product demo, is achievable with the CNs, but it's also putting in together third-party systems, such as ESR machines, such as instruments that perform HbA1cs. So it's something in the pipeline, and it is currently in development. Yeah.
Okay, and is there any plans to put any pre-analytics on there, like a centrifuge, so you can put unspun samples on and then?
Yes. Yeah.
Off you go.
For the future. Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things, Janine. So with the CN series, when auto QC is performed, whether it be time interval QC, time specific QC, or test count QC, there is a way in the job list screen that you can actually filter that, and it comes under ordered by. You've got an ordered by column, And that way you can actually disseminate when an auto QC was performed and what type of auto QC was performed as well. If you're searching to find out more information as to like when it was actually performed, that is all available in the operation log. So there's two ways you could do it. You can filter via, say, all data in the job list, or via the operation log. So yeah, they've definitely made it more intuitive on the CN series.
I think the other thing as well is with regards to the auto QC is something you mentioned in the presentation. Is it that there's a few more additional features been added to the auto QC with regards to being able to run QC based on sample numbers now and actual time scheduled, as well as the normal time intervals and vial change QCs as well. So there are some additional features on the auto QC too.
Absolutely. So test count QC providing now a Six Sigma workflow benefit here by, we all know failure rates for certain tests such as D-dimer are always going to be higher than for routine tests such as, say, PT. So you can actually, you can customize what your requirements are for test count QC. And absolutely, we've also got the ability to do multi-vial QC. So this ability now to load on all your reagents at the beginning of the day and perform QCs on all the reagent vials for each assay at that time, rather than during sample analysis, which potentially then delays workflow and how quick your results are reported.
So is there any published data on the validation of the platelet aggregation module?
Good question. So back in 2018, on the CS series, on the 2100s, a multi-center validation was performed by 3 sites: Royal London, St Thomas's, and by Bristol Royal Infirmary. That was the phase 1 study. And the reason why it was the phase 1 study is because of the fact that it was difficult from an ethics point of view to get approval for abnormal or patients with either platelet dysfunction or platelet disorders to be bled for a study. It's something that is currently being worked on. I can't divulge, say, any more information, Anthony, but agreed. I've been based on the guidelines we have from ISCH, from ISTH. This is what is then going to form phase 2. But yeah, 100%. This is what we do need, and it's something that in the UK we've always pushed for. What are the boundaries in hemostasis, and we will continue to do this.
If I remember correctly, we've got both cap piercing and non-cap piercing probes on the CN series analyzer. So it's there's not a non-cap piercing model, but you can run everything in non-cap piercing mode if you wish to, which will reduce your dead volumes. I think that's what you're getting at, isn't it, Steve? So exactly the same functionality on the system. You can just run in non-cap piercing mode.
So the benefits of island automation as well as TLA automation are apparent for sites that wish to have control to reduce turnaround times effectively. Island automation 100% would be your best choice, your best option. For those sites where total laboratory automation is a requirement, is a need or a necessity, because you wish to provide a true blood science work cell, then of course TLA connection needs to be apparent. We have already got TLA connectivity with Impeco. This has been realized, and obviously more. We need to work with third-party providers to be able to, and we are. So for sure, TLA connectivity will be possible in the CN series.
That's an easy answer, isn't it? That's just a yes. Basically, we can store IQC material on board the analyzer. And there's not really any limits onto how many QCs you can store on board either, because of course we can put any reagents in any position, so you're not restricted to 2, 4, 8, 10, whatever. So yeah, that's a simple yes basically, and they're all kept in temperature control conditions as well.
Absolutely. Just something as well, just to reiterate, is that the fact that Sysmex are able to provide you with a batch hold for not just reagents, but for QC materials as well. It means that the storage capacity of QC data on the CN series means that there's no loss of data incurred Obviously, we will always encourage customers to perform backups so that it's not just QC data, but it's maintenance data, job list data is also stored and saved. But the fact that the QC chart archive has a huge number of QC data points that you can store, there will be no running to a max and then losing that data from therein. Yes. It's not just quality controls that is of interest to hemostasis, but it's also calibration curves. Unlike hematology, calibration curves in hemostasis are just as important as QC results. So,
careful.
So for sure, CareSphere will also be including the review and comparison of calibration curves between analyzers at individual sites, but also across sites for hub and spoke settings where you've got a hub hospital as well as spoke hospital in networks. It's in development. We cannot yet share when these will be, but they are coming. Yeah. Absolutely. This is something, Nigel, we are trying to work on. It's let me start by saying I think it was just over a year ago NEQAS tried to present this or provide this as an EQA assessment of hemolysis to laboratories. It's something that I know that NEQAS are following up on, and I do hope so as well. So all I can say is do we have to answer it simply, do we have a validation that I can provide you with on the CN series? No. But is it there for the CS series? Well, yes. Royal Hallamshire and Sheffield did provide validation of hemolysis checks across a multiple array of assays on board. But in terms of providing, say, added benefit, we need to do more. And it's tricky, but at the same time, what we do also need to do is use paired samples and not spike samples for hemolysis checks. And I guess that's in some, it also does incur a bit of trickiness to it to ensure that you can obtain those paired samples to do those studies.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical that this is performed in the right way. There are a number of studies, I'm sure you've seen them, looking at the differences between manually disturbed samples, getting hemolysis through manual techniques, through putting them through a narrow gauge syringe, through spiking samples, and none of them mimic the real conditions of a clinically paired sample. So it's a more difficult experiment to do and validation to do, but that's the way we should be doing these things. So that's our plan to do that.
Absolutely. Just on the topic as well, I mean, in reference to island laboratory automation, where you have up to 3 CN analyzers connected to against a Sysmex track, the benefit of being able to do pre-analytical checks such as sample volume and HIL means that the sample volume and HIL checks are performed on the first instance. If that sample is then presented again to either of the CNs, it will then not actually display those level checks again, and it's just simply because in the past this can cause confusion for the customer, where you've got all of a sudden now an underfilled level check coming up where you previously didn't have that. Of course it's going to be underfilled because it's already aspirated plasma to do the first batch of tests. So it's intuitive, the software, and that incorporates CT90, incorporates EPU, the programs discussed earlier in the demo. Simple answer, I guess, would be, will you notice the difference? No. Is there an actual difference? Slightly, and that is the truth of it. The benefit that you're receiving by having chemiluminescence testing integrated with classical hemostasis is that, number one, you're only using the one citrate sample to perform those tests. So let's just hypothetically say you are wanting to do PT, ABTT, fibrinogen, as well as TAT and TM, the fibrinolytic marker tests. It will draw up the aspiration from that single tube, dispense that into a primary aliquot. That primary aliquot will then, on board the analyzer, dispense it into a secondary aliquot. That aliquot then moves over to the chemiluminescence side. So the chemiluminescence and the classical hemostasis are both working at the same time, but away from each other. So that means that the throughput for classical hemostasis is not significantly affected. So you're still being able to achieve throughputs as discussed. So whether it's a 3000 attached with chemiluminescence to make the 3500, or the 6000 attached with chemiluminescence, which is the 6500, the throughput on the classical hemostasis side, it's still getting up to that maximum discussed earlier figures, as well as for chemiluminescence being able to report results within 17 minutes from sample aspiration.
Well, generally speaking, with S-Corp, it's the larger the number, the larger the throughput. I think that's what you're meaning, aren't you, Steve? So, and then if there's a variation on that, so 3000 is 6000 is faster than 3000, and 6500 is faster than 3500. There's no difference in the portfolio of tests that are performed between the 6500 and the 3500, and no difference between the 6000 and the 3000 with regards to the range of tests that are performed. So that's really the difference, to be honest. Is the bigger the number, the higher the throughput.
Ultimately, it really ultimately comes down to what the customer requires in terms of workflow. Number one, do you require 2 CNs to be tracked or 3 CNs? If we're talking about island laboratory automation, firstly. If you have, let's just hypothetically say, for the majority of sites, we'll be using, say, 2. And the reason why you'd have 2 is going back in time, you'd have your main analyzer, but you'll have one as a backup, or it might serve as doing exactly the same workload on both because of the numbers that you do from day to day. If laboratory space is a concern, you have the ability to then incorporate turn units as number one, and that's only if you have, say, more than, say, 2 CNs connected, so you've got 3 CNs. But you've also now got the added ability to integrate the tube sorting and archiving module. Absolutely, I think it would be a must-have for customers, and the reason for that is it now provides true automation, not just simply you put the racks on board, it performs those tests, it comes back, and then you then manually have to archive them. It's only doing half the job. And the tube sorter here would provide 2 functions. It provides an ability to sort those samples in accordance to priority. Is the sample coming from A&E or from ITU? In which case, the tube sorter will sort it accordingly, and that rack will then go on first to the CN. Or is it, and then once obviously those tests have been completed, they will come back and be archived automatically by the tube sorter. So in essence, it's using XN series components that we know are very successful. They've been there in the market for decades now, and it's finally providing island automation with the CN series. Then TLA, so the total laboratory automation, where you're combining now chemistry, hematology onto one line, there is now this benefit of applying the CN series to that, of course, number one, but also, like the XN series, the ability to track the CN track, and that is something that we are working with third-party TLA providers for. And the reason why that's important is because we know total laboratory automation providers the TLA system will at some point incur downtime, whether it's maintenance of some sort. Automation cannot be guaranteed 365 days a year, all of the time. Why would you then have the CN track connected? Well, it provides you with automation for hemostasis. In essence, and also in addition to this, you can also still front load samples on the front sampler. So at no point are you losing the ability to provide a hemostasis service by your laboratory.
I think probably it will be slightly, but I think in general terms, most people would run platelet aggregations separately. The reason being generally the sample stability is more of an issue with platelet aggregation. I don't know what your experience is, Chris. You probably run these.
Again, we've done a few tests anyway, but for sure, I think platelet aggregation, to me, it's always been a specialized sort of test. So when customers would perform platelet aggregation, it would be done in isolation. If you are doing it together with other routine or specialist testing involved in hemostasis, of course, I think it naturally would affect throughput, but not significantly so. And that's because of the ability of the CN analyzer to hold that bolus of plasma on board, releases the sample ultimately pretty much straight away once aspiration's been completed, to then, perform the tests that have been ordered.
I can think of one that's certainly been moved over, and that's the Clot-Waveform Analysis algorithm in the background for the early reaction errors. We've had a lot of feedback with regards to early reaction errors on the CS series, and that's been solved by using Clot-Waveform Analysis by reducing the false positivity by over 99%. So, and we've got data to support that as well. So, yes, there has been some crossover there. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Krish?
Yeah. I mean, just one comment actually. It's regarding this term that's constantly, and I feel like I'm fighting it all the time. Early reaction errors. They're not actually an error. It is actually a flag. It's showing you a biphasic waveform to say that there's something else clinically going on with that patient sample. The reason why we see it as errors and why customers will see it as errors is because it's affecting validation. It's affecting result reporting. So it is one thing that we already now are seeing on the CS5100 and 2500 with the software upgrades that are currently being performed by sites. So with version 22 on the CS5100 and version 11 on the 2500, that is there. But it's just to reiterate that, yes, the analyzer will now in the software be able to provide you with a result, but still show you the biphasic waveform. And this is why I think it's heavy to stress this now, that clot curves are important to be observed on the analyzer, observed in EPU, so that it gives you, or the viewer, the scientist, a true representation of what's actually going on in that patient plasma, rather than just seeing them as errors and annoying errors. There's more going on for sure. So absolutely. So say, for example, the analyzer is currently in processing mode. Yes, you would literally highlight the available reagent position in the reagent screen, click on the replace button. It will obviously finish what it needs to do, but within, it depends on how far it is, depending on what it's doing. So is it at the point of sampler aspiration? Is it at the point of incubation or detection? Based on that numbers, it will take anywhere from 10 seconds to anywhere to up to a few minutes. Once it's now at that position where it can give you that reagent table, you can then load it on board, and it then picks up where it left off. Yeah.
I think the other thing maybe to mention as well is that the CN series has some reagent usage prediction programs on there as well. So the idea being that it will help you to load sufficient reagents at the beginning of the day to cover the workload specific for that day. And there are a number of ways that prediction model can work as well. So it can work based on an average of all days. It can be very specific, it being a Wednesday or a Thursday, or alternatively, if you've got you can use the knowledge and experience of some of your staff in there, and you can just put manual entries in there to say we always want to have 2, 3, 4, 500 PTs on board at any one time. And I think also combined with the stability of the routine reagents, there's no reason why you couldn't have a couple of days reagents on board there, because as Krish has mentioned earlier, the stabilities of the reagents have been enhanced on the CN as well. So they're stable for a minimum of 3 or 4 days on board the analyzer.
Yes, so Stanley, I think what you're asking here is that on the CS 2000, 2100, 24, 2500 analyzer, there is like a maximum aspiration volume that it breaches if there are too many tests ordered. The benefit was on the CN 3000 and 6000, like I said, think of it as identical. When I say identical, it's similar to the CS 5100, meaning that the aspiration volume has been increased. Part of the throughput studies that Ian and I were talking about just a little while ago, in those throughput studies, I did a combination of tests from PT, APTT, fibrinogen, D-dimer, factor assays, all in one go. And now when I say factor assays, I'm talking about multi-dilution analysis. So it's in essence 3 tests. And again, no issues whatsoever. So it's because it's using the same, higher aspiration volumes as does the CS5100, you will not incur those issues that you would encounter where there's too many tests ordered. Thrombin time as well, and that's one that normally falls over because of the 100 microliters it requires. So including thrombin time plus all the assays I've just disclosed, you can do all of those tests in one.
And maybe it's worth mentioning as well something like the Klaus fibrinogen reagent. The liquid Klaus fibrinogen reagent has got a wider calibration range, so fewer dilutions will be required with that reagent as well. So the necessity to do them will be reduced.
Correct, absolutely. You've got both, in essence. The evaluation studies performed over the last 2 years at our validation centers incorporated originally just the single point factor assays, provided by the likes of Siemens. However, in the UK, and we will continue to push for this, is the fact that we needed the evaluation of multi-dilution analysis for linear one-stage factor assays. So we have both, but based on the market, based on the customer's hemostasis testing service, linear MDA is exactly what we should push for, and not single-point coagulopore factor assays.
Yeah, all the guidelines, the national international guidelines are pointing towards doing multi-dilution analysis of some description, normally a minimum of 3 dilutions. So that's what we're doing. But yeah, Chris is right, you can do both, but we would always recommend doing MDA. What we can say is that you've got access to clot waveform analysis. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, you can use it for any of the parameters. So we could use it on PT or APTT. I remember you can turn it on for any assay, if I remember rightly.
It's for PT, APTT. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So if you want to turn it on for PT and APTT and assess the functionality of clot waveform analysis in relation to TPA treatment, then certainly that can be done.
Yeah.
And we'd love to see that study, wouldn't we, Chris? Yeah,
absolutely. We have got, as a collation a couple of years back, we were trying to collate all the data that we have on clot waveform analysis and its benefits. So for sure, this to me sounds like a study.
It does, doesn't it? Give us a bell, Steve.
Anthony, just as we have done on the CS series, and that's using the slope ratio to address parallelism. And you can see, the comparison of your 3 dilutions typically performed by MDA and assessing those results against the calibration curve on the screen, which is something that you can't do from a single point factor assay. Instrument validation verification. This is where Sysmex support come in at the installation of an analyzer, or even post-installation if it's a validation of an assay that a customer is wishing to use. Our support team will provide you with that. And we've done this in the past, and we will continue to do so on the CS series, as well as now, obviously, the CN series. Batch acceptance, as already discussed with regards to QC and calibration curves, the CN analyzer allows you this added benefit of the software to intuitively provide that for you. But if you're now specifically asking about batch acceptance of results and how that data is then observed for cross-site comparison, that is exactly where CareSphere will come in. And it's not just cross-site comparison of QC results, but it's also including, or will include, cross-site comparison of calibration curves between sites. And again, the reason for that is so that you can assess issues pertaining to either internal QC errors or concerns, or external QC issues. So say, for example, let's just hypothetically say site within your network has a NEAT-QAS return that's out with consensus, whereas the other sites, no such issue has been incurred. You could do a comparison of the calibration curves to say, was it the calibration curve on that analyzer? Yes or no. If it is, straight away it was due to that and that reason only. I think it's been a pleasure to say that it's yes, Guy's and St. Thomas's Hospital. The deal is for 6 CN systems, of which 3 have been installed so far. 3 are yet to come for them, and that will include the 6500. The only reason why I'm saying we're in between the installations is purely from a logistics point of view. You need to, everything gets involved. It's not just a case of here's the analyzer, where do you want us to put it? You need the builders, you need to have space to be able to do it. So it is currently there. But the important thing is for routine clinical use, yes, we already have St. Thomas's having 2 CN 6000s and a CN 3000 at Guy's Hospital. And again, it's just a pleasure considering our, over the years, the amount of studies we've done, not just on, say, the most recent CS analyzers, but even on the CA series. And Ian, I'm sure you can speak much about the studies that are done previously on the CA series. So it's now looking to the new generation and what that will bring in terms of studies moving forward.
Yeah, and it's it might be worth mentioning also that from a point of view of things like the user symposium and having some scientific posters and stuff like that, we really do try to support where we possibly can research and development within the laboratories. So yeah, please get in touch if you've got some ideas for some studies. So yes, that's a very nice question from a point of view of we were able to access both Siemens reagents and Hyphen Biomed reagents. So we've got a very long-standing partnership with Siemens, which has been very successful over the last 20 or so years, more than 20 years now. And it's got we have a rolling renewal on that, and there's no idea for us to stop doing that. So what we have in addition is the Hyphen reagents portfolio, and what that gives us is an ever-expanding range of liquid reagents, which I know we've talked about a lot already. It also gives us some robustness with regards to supply as well, because we have 2 separate supply chains, one from Hyphen obviously in France and one from Siemens in Germany. We've got different plasma pools as well, so donor collections. We have 2 different donor collections, and also production facilities as well. So it gives us some very much a great deal of resilience within that as well. Plus, if we get those rare occasions where we may have a batch issue with something that we're unable to resolve, or there's maybe a performance preference from one reagent to another, then we can help with those sorts of things as well. It's something certainly the hemostasis community, I think, is historically like to choose between reagent portfolios, and we're now able to do that within the umbrella of Sysmex UK as well. So we can cherry pick reagents from 2 reagent portfolios, and I think it's important to mention that they're all supported by our expert product team as well, with regards to implementation and CE marking and troubleshooting and support. So there's no difference between the support between the 2 reagents. So I think there are a great deal of advantages of the 2 reagent portfolios.
Absolutely. I know something that used to come up quite frequently from customers, and it was from UCAS accreditation point of view, where UCAS would contact hemostasis laboratories or during the visitation and make a note of, are third-party controls being used?
Yeah.
This answers that question, is because of the fact that Sysmex as a producer and manufacturer and supplier of analyzers it needs to be understood that it's separate to the reagents being manufactured by Hyphen and Siemens. So it answers the question of third-party QCs being used.
We would expect that to be the case, Steve, because there are slight differences to the detection technology with regards to the difference between CN and CS. So they're not going to be lumped into the CS series. We would expect them to have their own user group within NEQAS, because obviously we're using longer lasting LED detection systems now with reduced maintenance, and so we would expect that to be the case. Although of course on hemostasis NEQAS groups, most of those groupings are within reagent groups as well, so there's a couple of distinctions there, but yes, we'd expect a separate group for CN series. I've just had a message from Rachel just to say who's our product manager and our product support manager, and we've already been in discussion to say that it will be added as a drop down option through the registration. So yes, the answer is yes, Steve.
Benefit of QC batch acceptance on the CN series is that you don't have to run current and new lots in tandem. You have the ability to select current and new either together or individually for QC batch acceptance. Obviously, the benefit of running them together gives you the ability to perform the 5x5, let's just say. So 5 QCs per day for 5 days for, say a working week, and then using that data to compare it against your current lot that's currently being used in time, so that the following week or whenever it is your current lots of QCs have then diminished in terms of quantities, and you're now ready to move over to the new lot, that can incur. So yeah, that they can be run separately or they can be run together on the CN. So the automatic switching of detection sensitivity, for grossly lipemic samples, is it routinely QC'd? No, it's an automatic switching of the wavelength that's being used for the assay concerned. Let's just say for fibrinogen as an example. In terms of how it's then QC'd, this is something, Curtis, we are looking into, providing a level not just for lipemia, but also for hemolysis and icterus samples as well. And again, that's what I was trying to introduce, is something that NEQAS have started to do. I want to say I'm sure it was 2019 when they released that survey for hemolysis testing. So it's this ability to then ensure that not just an analyzer from Sysmex, but across the board, it needs to be, hemolysis, icterus, and lipemic samples are standardized, or testing of those samples are standardized by internal quality controls as well as external quality controls. So it's something that we are looking into. So we've got the technology to say, yes, we can do it. We've got the data to show that we can test lipemic samples, and results against, say, performing it manually. The result data does look good, which is how it's been validated. But in terms of how do you standardize it, we need to have quality controls to assess that. Yeah. So let's begin by saying about the CS series. What was achievable in the CS 5100? You have fixed measurement times for all assays, and that is the time required for which the clot occurs, and then once the endpoint is reached, the result is then given. On the CN series now, for clot-based tests, you have a new clotting algorithm that performs an 8-second interval check to detect the endpoint of the reaction. If the endpoint has been reached, there's no need to then continue until the end of measurement time. And that's why we're able to achieve results within 4.5 minutes for clot-based tests. And because of that saving of time just per test, down to less than 4.5 minutes, it doesn't end there. It continues across the board. And that's why you're ultimately saving hours in your day from testing on a CN6000 because of its maximum throughput achieved.
It's worth mentioning the advantages of using single cuvettes in this. I like to talk about single cuvettes, Rish. It's something that helps with this as well, because we're not compromising on quality by reducing the time to first result. We're able to do this because we've got the flexible system, as Chris has mentioned, around the dynamic detection times. But what we've also got is the flexibility within the reaction cuvettes as well, so that we can move those single reaction cuvettes, up the queue very, very easily, because it's just a case of when it gets aspirated and then it gets moved on. So when we talk about time to first results, when we look at things like stat samples, then the time for a stat sample PT is the same. It's 4.5 minutes. So we're not having to wait for a long time to nudge in a test into the stat sample. So it's the fastest stat turnaround time, I believe, on the market as well as getting a good first time to result as well.
So the fact that you can load samples on the CN track into a 10 sample rack, you can front load using the 6 sample rack, or you can use the stat position. So you've got 3 methods of processing samples on a CN track when you have 2. So
yeah, and I suppose also the tracked CNs on a system can be front loaded, and essentially that front loading capacity becomes the stat facility, because it will be accessed as a priority as it does on the CS. So
yeah,
we can run 10 live calibration curves at any one time, so it's actually the same as the CS series. So I mean, the beauty of the calibration curves on the Sysmex hemostasis analyzers is that it's an automatic reading from the correct calibration curve as well. So there's no manual, oh, use this calibration curve. It's the analyzer does all of that decision making for you. So there's no security risk through operator error, or just not realizing that a batch has changed. The analyzer does all of that for you. So when the reagents go on board the system, the analyzer reads the barcodes for the reagents and knows which calibration curve to read that that result from. So it's very, very secure in that respect. And of course, the beauty of the CN series as well is you can load up to three different batches of reagents on the analyzer, and it will seamlessly switch between them as well. If of course they're all calibrated, and if they're not calibrated, the analyzer will let you know that they're not calibrated as well from the reagent management screen. So, so 10 live calibration curves per test. Yeah. So 10 for PT, 10 for fibrinogen, 10 for D-dimer.
Yeah. So is it 60? We have 60 active assays that you can have active at any one time. 10 live calibration curves in total. So that means 600 live calibration curves going on if you needed it, basically available to you.
There's 60 at any one time, but you can actually have a lot more active at the same time. But I mean, we're getting pedantic here. Who's ever going to need that amount of calibration curves? So.
It's something that we do get asked about this often, not just on the CN series, but CS series. The process at which QC control and calibration curve performance occurs is the same. The only difference being is that you've got a primary sample probe and a secondary sample probe, yes, given. But in terms of the process and how the sample or the test occurs is exactly the same. The benefit on the CN series, however, what we need to reiterate is that you can actually perform QCs as well as calibration curves either on board the reagent table, i.e. the QC materials is placed on board, the calibrator materials is placed on board as you have on the CS series, or, which is actually just to point out now as well, from a sample rack for both. We already knew that you could do this on the CS series for QC materials, Cytrol 1, Cytrol 2, etc., etc. But for calibration curves, you can also perform this from a sample rack. And again, I mean, it leads on to other things as well. This is where I discussed earlier about cross-mixing functionality, the ability to do 5 dilutions for cross-mixing, and again on the sample rack using normal patient plasma to produce 5 dilutions, and again from the same sample rack. And again, I don't know how long have you got talking about index of circulating anticoagulant for Rosner index. But yeah, so Stanley, going back to your question per se, it is performed in exactly the same way for consistency on board.
Yeah, it's very much a byword for the CN series is standardization. So we do test the same, whether it be QC, whether it be calibration, or whether it be a patient sample. Same probes, same timing, same incubations, pre-warming, everything is exactly the same. And of course, on the Sysmex analyzers, we use very, very precise incubation times as well. So for instance, we will always do a pre-warming stage. It will vary from assay to assay depending on the requirement for those sort of things, but it's the same every time you do it. Whether it's a PT, it'll be the same whether it be a QC, a calibration, or a patient sample. And that means, of course, that we get very, very low variation. The precision has been improved on the CN from the CS. It's exquisite. It really is.
Guys, before we leave here as well, please, once the Q&A session has ended, please do, on the left-hand side, click on the 3D product tool, and that goes through an interactive presentation for you to go through the models, the CN3000, 6000, as well as the chemiluminescence models for 3500 and 6500, as well as CN track. But it's an interactive interface for you to view, as well as providing you with articles, scientific journals, as well as the seed articles for you to gain access to and download should you wish to. So please do click on the 3D product tool to get to those sections.
Okay, and of course, if you do have any further questions that we haven't been able to fit in, then please either contact us through your local sales team, or directly to us, or through Roz, or whatever contact you wish to use. Then we will get back to you and try and answer that question for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. So yeah, please, hopefully, hope to see you soon, of course, depending on what happens over the next couple of months. But thank you all so much for attending. Obviously, no easy task when we're in a situation where we're still trying to work. So thank you for providing us with 2 to 3 hours of your time to be able to look at the CN series.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Take care.